Up in the morning and out to school. The teacher is teaching the golden rule.
Well, it's been a weird calendar year this year, Mark, and we've been talking a lot about that, and it seems like the start of the school year is sort of different for everybody this year. Titusville Area School District gets back on Tuesday. You've got the Crawford County Fair. Other districts, some starting this week, others starting next week. We've got folks from the Titusville Area School District in this morning, Superintendent Karen Jez and Business Manager Shawn Sampson, and lawbreaker, by the way, Karen. I don't know if you heard the cries of the thousands of school children yesterday as I observed Mr. Shawn Sampson walking across the street when the sign clearly was blinking, "Do not walk."
In my defense, it turned halfway through.
Well, welcome. Good morning, guys.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
It is important to wait till it says
It is. You didn't hear the thousands of kids crying over
I
that.
just heard you yelling at me.
Right time, right place, I guess. So, school back in session already Tuesday.
Yes.
That's incredible. What all has gone on to get ready for the big day?
Well, we've had a lot of various things happening over the course of this summer. Probably the two largest pieces of information and things that we've been working on, other than the fact that there's no budget at the state level, is the renovation at the high school is well underway. Phase 1's just about complete, and so all the new windows are in over at the Drake Street wing, I guess if you will, and the renovation of the admin offices are projected to be a little ahead of schedule. So that's all.
That's
it's
great.
all good news. And coupled with that is we're excited about the agreement that we've entered into for the sale of Shady House, and the folks looking at the home are very interested in the history of it and want to maintain the integrity of that.
And that's fantastic. And I think
Yes.
that was a concern, is what happens to such a historic building in the community. And it's great to know that you guys have worked hard, and it wasn't like we're just going to abandon this. You guys, saw it all the way through and took care of it. So
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note there's a process behind this. We can't just simply sell it. We have to get to a couple appraisals. We now have to file with the judge, and the judge has to review the sale and then give his permission as well.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little bit of a process we'll be working through. Hopefully by December we'll have that complete.
So a lot of moving parts then behind the scenes.
Yes.
That's fantastic. So over Christmas break, you guys will be moving into the new part of the building?
Or potentially, because they seem to be a little bit ahead of schedule, we may actually get to move a little bit quicker than that.
Oh, wow.
Mid-November.
So the home ec department will be baking turkeys for you guys for Thanksgiving.
there you go.
just eat right there.
Yeah.
Speaking of the budget, everybody says, okay, the time has passed, we're into July. Nobody's really going to be affected by this yet. Then you get into August. Now it looks like September, maybe October. At what point does it start to have an impact on you guys?
I think probably you get to the September time period, planning starts to take effect as far as whether, if we go into November, December, we know we have to do something. So the planning for that has to start in September. And that would be in the form of some type of line of credit, tax anticipation note. There's certainly other school districts, and then more importantly some other state agencies that'll start to struggle sooner than we will. But our budget's 70% state revenue, so obviously right now we're working on fund balance and incoming tax revenue. So we project December we would have to probably look at doing some kind of other type of financing. Obviously nobody wants it to go that long, but it's a possibility.
And Titusville's done a really good job with balancing everything and taking. Like when Mark's covered other news stories, we hear Conneaut or Pencrest with big deficits, and I know it's really hard to try to keep things down to the penny, but I think Titusville's done a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's a long process. It seems like we're constantly in budget. one ends and another one begins. But I think, it's important. People talk about, how are you going to do this without a budget? Well, interesting enough, our budget's set and it's done. We have this almost every year, because even if they pass a budget June 30th, all our planning essentially has been done. So if people can imagine planning their budgets with 70% of their revenue kind of up in the air, that's what we do each year. And then, this year's unusual just because it's carrying past. But it's pretty much what we have to deal with each year.
So what do you see happening? Do you see it getting done sometime before December?
Yeah, I think nobody knows, but I think it probably gets done before December. But this budget has so many moving parts. You hear about liquor privatization, you hear about pension reform, you hear about basic ed funding formula changes, and there's many more on top of that. But those are big issues that in any one year would be difficult to tackle. And they're trying to tackle all the major ones now. I think our biggest fear is something gets done somehow overnight or fairly quickly, and we don't get an opportunity to analyze it and maybe give some input. Certainly the issues are known, but sometimes a deal's done and here it is without
surprise.
Yeah. And that's always a concern for us. And we try to stay, Karen tries to stay involved, so, as I do with the legislature, and have some discussion. But right now, I think it's just at the higher levels, and we're waiting to see.
Karen, we get stories all the time from folks, not to point out different organizations, but they rely on state money.
Sure.
And obviously we hear stories where somebody's taken out a personal loan to float an organization. Well, I'm sure the school districts in the region work with some of those organizations. Does that make it tough then to reach out when you know that there's an organization struggling?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because at some point, they may have to be told, don't come to work today. Unfortunately, if this budget impasse carries on, and the community organizations that we work with that are state funded, drug and alcohol, mental health, for our student assistance services and programming, we're hoping that they're able to stay active as this carries through, but they don't have any guarantees like even us, but Shawn does an outstanding, with the Tax and Finance Committee, they do an outstanding job with the budget, and so, as he said, we're okay probably till December, but some of these smaller organizations that really depend on state funding, it is a concern, absolutely, because our kids need those services and their families.
And it's that kind of issue that starts to drive the pressure a little more, unfortunately. You don't want it to come to that, but the reality of it is, right now, everybody's operating, for the most part, okay. It's like you said, September, October, things start to get tight, and that adds to the pressure. And
well, now you're talking about, like you said, if you're taking out loans, now you're talking about interest payments and things that you weren't necessarily expecting, and it actually starts costing money.
It does, and and it's time and effort and legal fees. Being a government organization, we don't do anything easily. I wish we would.
No.
So, there's all kinds of regulations to make sure we're following, and it's expensive, and it's an unnecessary step.
So, how difficult is it going into a new school year and making sure that, athletics are, something that can continue on without being touched, and this, curriculum can still have this, or textbooks can be bought here? Everybody fights for those things, and it's easier said than done. We're not behind the scenes looking at numbers. Is it getting tougher to maintain what we expect?
Well, I would say that the former governor's first year in office, when things got really tight with the ERA money being backfilled in for basic ed and all of those kinds of things, Titusville took a long, hard look at where we were and what we needed to do, And we made the decision at that time not to replace retirement positions, and we actually had to furlough both support and teaching positions. But it was done with the understanding that we weren't going to devastate any curricular area or the extracurricular. The board really wants to do what's best for kids, and they understand that educating kids in a rounded, well-rounded opportunity, so the academics, extracurriculars, athletics, all of those pieces and the humanities are all important. And so we've maintained that stance, and so we have line items that the board hasn't touched that are specific for academics, which would include the health and PE, the art, the music, so that those kinds of pieces can continue. And I think it speaks highly of our community that we're committed to the education of our kids in that fashion.
Well, even Wilderness Quest. I mean,
Yeah.
that is, if you listen to the past 30 years of folks who graduated, that is a top memory for them, or something that they really got something out of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as Karen said, probably 6-7 years ago, we really took a look and recognized that things were changing, and really looked at the approach to adjust when it wasn't panic mode, in other words.
Yeah.
So we made a lot of adjustments, and then we planned out forward to try to plan for those things. But I think the other thing that's important with what we do is we do maintain a fund balance, and we try not to panic over a state budget in any given year, because you hear the horror stories and then it's not as bad, or maybe it is as bad. But if you snap your budget back and forth all the time, you create issues. And I think what we try to do is, if this year turns out to be worse than expected, we have a little harder budget next year, not in this year trying to panic and
Right. It's almost like
budget.
investing.
Yeah.
The people that are constantly moving things around.
Right.
Now, the one exception, though, is I was devastated when you cut ping pong out of the athletic budget.
Yeah.
I mean, that was horrible. And speaking of programs like that, not controversy, but there was a couple folks who said, you can't start school the same week as the fair. And you guys have been very vocal about saying, it's pretty simple. We support what you're doing. This is a fantastic educational opportunity. Just contact your building principal, explain the situation, and you can still do what you need to do.
Absolutely. We understand the importance of the 4-H programming and having kids have that hands-on real life experience, and that's what that's all about. And after the fact, we realized we were double booked, but it isn't going to harm anybody. This same process that you just outlined is how we've functioned with our families that participate in the Spartansburg Fair for years, because it's always starts on Labor Day and carries through that week of school, and we've always accommodated those students, and so it's really no different. At this point, I think I've had about 10 families contact either the middle school or the high school. Now, with open houses last night, there may be a few more than that, but we're not discouraging families at all from having their kids participate. It's an excellent opportunity for them.
And you guys have been great. Like, we call like at Columbus Day and say we're taking the week off to sail, and you have been more than helpful.
We don't really encourage.
No, you don't? Okay.
I think the other thing too, though, is one thing people may not understand is our schedule is dictated to a large degree by the VOTEC.
Yes.
Right.
And that's a Venango County system, and obviously the Venango County schools didn't have the same issue with the fair this year, and usually probably never will. So we have to tie into that schedule, which kind of dictates our schedule.
Yeah.
It's just a weird calendar year.
Yeah.
Very weird. Yeah.
But-
it probably won't happen again for, who knows, another 10 or 15 years that they'll overlap like this.
So, going into classroom discussion, a lot of discussion took place this past school board meeting with Common Core. Is this something that you guys continue to? And it seems like maybe the administration sits sort of in the middle because you're listening to school board members, you're listening to the teacher side of things. Is that a difficult balance for you guys to try to accommodate everybody?
Well, it is difficult because we have to be mindful that the law is the law, and the state has adopted the PA core standards, Common Core for the nation, and with the federal No Child Left Behind now being called ESEA, those are mandated things that we have to follow. But we certainly understand, and I don't disagree with what was said at the last board meeting. We are over standardized testing our kids, and it is causing test anxiety and frustration and upset. I can give you unfortunate stories of some students who just really get they work themselves up over these tests. Now, we want them to be concerned about their academic performance, obviously, but not to the point where they're that physically upset. And the nation is over testing kids, quite frankly, and we need to find a balance as a nation, because we learned yesterday that those nations that are really teaching to the test are the number one nations or students' performance, but they are lacking creativity, which is what America has been always proud about, that we are innovative and we have creativity, and it's okay for us not to be number one. We don't certainly want to be at the bottom, but to be in the 50th, 40th percentile, up closer in the 75th percentile, somewhere up in that range is okay for us. And it says that we have a balance, that we're educating our kids academically, physically, and emotionally.
Well, certainly one of the things that we heard mentioned on Monday night was the Common Core was born out of the No Child Left Behind thinking, and certainly all of this was born out of the idea that we want what's best for our kids. We want a country full of people who are well-informed, well-educated. I don't think anybody gets up in the morning with the idea that, we're going to make life more difficult, but in the long run, this certainly has made life a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think Dr. Draper, who we had in yesterday, expressed too, they talk a lot of times about the national, rankings, China and so forth. The United States never was number one. Now, obviously, you want to be up as high as you can. But you take SAT scores that he referenced, they compare back to when they started, and it was a very small subset of kids that took that test, and they were the ones going to college. Now you have every subgroup under the sun taking the test, and they're all up, but the overall test scores are down. And if you look at China and different places, they have tracks. Once you don't do well on tests, you go off to the work track or a different interview.
Right.
So you really have to understand and look at the numbers and understand them before you just. And a lot of legislation is driven off of those type of numbers and really not drilled down and understand what they really mean. I think.
Here is Dr. Draper. Let's play just a quick clip. This is the Morning Joe on Stream Television and the Allegheny News Talk Sports Network.
As the Executive Director for the Educational Research Service, we pulled a lot of information on hot topics such as graduation rate, achievement gap, charter schools, all the issues to see how our schools doing. And the research tells us that our schools are better than they've ever been. Now, do we have some problems? Do we have room for improvement? Absolutely. But overall, they're the best they've ever been. So we did some study on what are some of the factors that are causing a decline in support. And so our society is changing, and there are things that are changing that are impacting support for public schools. But public schools are the backbone of education in this country. Strong public schools, strong communities, strong families. That's what we got to have.
Strong families. how can families, how can parents get involved this school year? How can they help out their kid or their school?
I think that families being engaged with their building and their teachers and understanding what is being taught and asking questions when they don't understand, just the whole open communication, dialogue back and forth is the best way for families to help their kids be more successful. And truly, we all as a community need to encourage our students to get the best education that they can, because it's life-changing, and we can be anybody we want to be if you have the right education.
I hear stories once in a while from folks not in Titusville, and I'm very fortunate to have gone through this system because I think the majority of the teachers I had, all the teachers I had were just phenomenal teachers. And I don't know how you guys do it or what your process is in hiring, but I know there's a new batch this year.
Yeah, 8.
And I've met a couple of them, and they seem like there's something really special about them. So, I don't know how you do it, but congratulations on that.
Thanks. We have a great team that interviews and a process, and if you follow your process, you can get the best people in place.
I think coming, I'd been at some other schools prior to this, and one of the things that surprised me was the time and effort put into it. And I think the candidates, when they interview, are really almost, I don't want to say intimidated, but they're surprised at how involved the administration and the board is, because they come into a room and sometimes there's 6, 7 or more people sitting around them, and I think it's a team effort there.
Yeah. Well, congratulations and good luck with the new school year.
Hey, thanks.
Hard to believe. Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
All righty, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, he continues his ramblings in sports. No athlete left behind. Bruce Peterson will discuss that when we come back.